are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. I am Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool, and today we are answering your Twitter questions ahead of the Cowboys' Week 18 game against the Philadelphia Eagles. But before we get into all the news and notes going into that game and your questions, Landon, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I did hear a report that there was a meteor explosion over part of Pennsylvania, kind of close to where I think you are. And I wasn't sure if it was a meteor explosion or just you reading the news about Micah Parsons and having an explosion. So I'd like to get that cleared up right away.
Yeah, so it was fairly close to me. I didn't notice it, but I thought it was going to do something with me being upset that the Steelers beat the Browns on Monday Night Football. It had nothing
Why
to
would
do
you
with
be
that.
upset your favorite team won a game, Marcus? I don't know.
Can I just say real quickly, we don't have to have a big slobber fest over every quarterback that just retires or whatever. Like, there's certain guys that we don't need to do this with, and it seemed like we did not need to have that one on Monday. That's all. That's all I want to say.
I look, if we wanted to do a whole podcast on that, I don't know that anybody in Cowboy Nation would be upset about it. But we're going to move on because we don't need to linger on him any longer than the national media did.
There you go. All right, let's get to your Twitter questions. But later, before that, we did get some news right before we jumped on the podcast. Micah Parsons, Defensive Rookie of the Year, maybe the Defensive Player of the Year, tested positive for COVID. With the Cowboys playing here on Saturday, it's a pretty tight turnaround. I wouldn't expect him to play. How much of an impact does it have in this game, and are you worried about him going forward?
I'm pretty sure that he's vaccinated just based on the numbers. Yeah. So, I can't imagine a scenario where he is going to play in this game. I mean, it's even with the relaxed
unless
protocols,
it's a false positive, that'd be the only case,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, or if maybe he tested positive yesterday, and then
Mike McCarthy this morning said they had no new positive tests. So I'm guessing.
So this just happened. Okay, yes. Then yeah, I can't imagine short of a false positive that there's any way that he's playing Saturday. So Cowboys kind of get screwed with the early game schedule a little bit, but I mean the COVID situation is the COVID situation.
It's the COVID situation, right? And,
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And here's the thing. You'd rather have this happen now than at this time next week, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I guess that's and not to kind of jump ahead, we had an interesting conversation question in our questions about Cooper and post-COVID, symptoms and that sort of thing. That's my only concern now, is like we don't really, there's a level of assumption by all of us that, okay, you're going to get COVID, you'll get over COVID, and then that's the last we're going to hear of it. But I don't know that that's always the case. I mean, I think, you just have to look at Ezekiel Elliott last year and some other folks that I just think that there is certain people that when they get it, it hits them harder and there's a longer recovery time to kind of get your wind back up and that sort of thing. So that's really my only concern with Parsons at this point is that, is there going to be a long-term effect past when he's able to get back on the field?
Yeah. And it's pretty likely the Cowboys will play probably next Sunday. So that gives them 10 plus days to get ready. I would think he'd be pretty close to being ready to go. I also think, and I don't know if you noticed this at all, like I watched the defensive tape yesterday in L22. He was dealing with something, and I wasn't sure if he was winded. And maybe this could just be it was the start of COVID, but he was hurting. I don't think he was injured, but he was hurting.
I think he got like a rib shot or something because maybe he looked tender there, and it felt like he at one point he may have like had the wind knocked out of him even. So
it might not be the worst thing in the world and not have him play a meaningless football game on Saturday.
It's just, look, the Cowboys, we've been talking about it all week. I mean, it sounds like the Cowboys are going to try and play most folks. But, I mean, the fact that it's debatable means just kind of shows you how necessary it is, at this point. Like, I think they are wanting to play the Cowboys in order to make sure that they don't lose kind of or help to kind of get the offense back into some sort of rhythm. I don't know that, there's any reason that you would feel that you had to play Parsons or there was a dire need there. I think this is this is fine. Let him miss this game. But really, the important thing is making sure that he's healthy and ready to play next week.
I think he'll be okay. Now, the concern is a couple things. Is this going to continue to spread through the defense? Obviously, you hope that's not the case. But a lot of the defenses already had COVID, right? I mean, a lot of them have already missed games this year from COVID, but there's a couple that haven't, a couple big names that haven't, right? Trevon Diggs, Anthony Brown, DeMarcus Lawrence. Like you hope it doesn't spread. The other issue is they don't have a lot of linebackers right now.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
Keanu Neal is still on the COVID list. Francis Bernard is on the COVID list. He also has a groin injury. Jabril Cox is out for the season. Jalen Smith is dancing over in New York. Leighton Vander Esch. I mean, they just don't have a lot of players.
Yeah, and I think, even with the news that Curse also, I think, is popped up on the injury report with the hamstring. I mean, not that he plays linebacker, but that's just another guy that you would play at that spot, right? Yeah. So,
and maybe that's what we should just start calling these guys now, as box defenders rather than linebackers.
Positionless football is upon us.
You've got edge rushers, interior guys, and box defenders.
I mean, and frankly, those lines are being blurred at times. Yeah. So, I agree. But to kind of back to the point, I think the Cowboys are going to be missing, several key players and a lot of numbers at the second level of their defense.
Yeah, and it's not a great matchup against Philadelphia, who wants to run the ball basically on every single play. But luckily, this game doesn't mean all that much for Dallas or Philadelphia, which is okay. All right, let's take a quick break before we get to your questions so I can tell you guys about Built Bar. You guys know Built Bar. It's the new year. It's New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar, or maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easy to stick to your resolution because it just tastes so good. You'll want to eat healthy, but eating healthy gets boring. Built Bar helps you because it only has 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. That is promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at your next order at built.com. A lot of great flavors available right now. Coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many, many more. Again, LOCK15 at built.com. All right. Twitter question.
That counts real quick. That counts as answering a question for David, the creator, who actually asked if we could take a moment for Built Bar. So there you go, David. We did it for you, buddy.
I thought it was pretty funny. All right. From our guy, Mark, he wants to know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in this team for the playoffs?
That's a good question. I'm struggling with my confidence on it. I mean, just because of what we saw last week. Look, I still think this is a very good team. I still think that this is a team that when they play their best and when they're in sync, they can beat anybody. I mean, especially this year, this is just not a truly dominant team really in the NFC or the AFC, so I think that I still have confidence if they can kind of turn it around. And I just don't know that if we're going to see that this week necessarily. So I would say I'm probably a 6 or 7. But that's mostly based on my belief that this team has the talent to do what they need to do to move forward, not necessarily that I've seen them play the way that they need to play in the playoffs, very much in the last month, I would say.
I would also say I think I'm around the same. But the NFC playoffs are just good. Like, the teams that they're going to play are all just as good as them. And that's what makes this really hard. Like, it's not going to be a cupcake game in round 1 that you just kind of blow through and they blow out whoever they play. It's just not going to be the case. Like, you're going to either play the Rams, who are just star-studded all over the place, or the Cardinals, who you just lost to at home. So, like, I don't know how your confidence could be super high, but at the same time, this team is really talented. So I don't think you can be super low on them either. Is that a cop-out answer?
No, I think that's an accurate description of 6 or 7, right? To me, because it's like, 5 is like, it could go either way. 6 or 7 means, hey, I've seen them do this before. I know that they can do this. It's just that we haven't seen it lately, so I can't feel, an 8, 9, 10 level of confidence there.
I agree with you. All right, next question from Matt. He wants to know, could a guy with big-time speed, either in draft or free agency, unlock this offense? It seems like it's the one thing this offense lacks, especially at pass catcher. And I agree. They've been missing that guy that has the shoot speed, right? Like, they just need that guy that can really stretch the field and force teams to cover every blade of grass. They haven't had that guy since, I don't know, Rocket Ishmael. Joey
I mean, they've
Galloway?
had other guys. They've had other guys that have the kind of speed to threaten, but that aren't necessarily. That's the other thing too. How many times have teams chased speed in the draft or whatever? But the problem was that those players weren't good enough receivers to be actual threats. I mean, that's what makes
A million
a
of
guy
those, yes.
like
Philip Dorsett, right? Like Philip Dorsett was a first-round pick, right?
Yeah, that's what makes a guy like Tyreek Hill so unique, right? Is that he's incredibly fast, but he's a very good receiver, and that's what makes that speed threat realized, right? The Cowboys need a guy that has a little bit more of a stretch the field element than what we've got currently, but is also someone who is a threat to catch the ball down the field. I mean, I think it would help, obviously, to just give more space for the guys to operate underneath, but I also think it would help in some of the run game stuff as the kind of reverse guy. I mean, I like CeeDee Lamb there, but it doesn't quite have the same feel as when, and again, I'm not advocating for this person, but when you had a Tavon Austin or even a Lucky Whitehead, go all the way back, just to have some of those guys that, as soon as they get the ball, they're going to be the fastest person going that direction. I think that is helpful and just kind of, again, making, like you said, making the defense defend every blade of grass, which is going to open things up for everyone else.
And there are different types of these guys, like the Tavon guy that you mentioned, the super shifty kind of quick guy, or there's the long strider, right? Like we've seen that kind of before, where if this guy gets ahead of steam running down the field, even like Terrence Williams, like he wasn't the super fastest, but he was a really good long strider, right? Like, I'm starting to think the Cowboys need the kind of guy that can make plays down the field. But it's hard to find those guys, Lane, as you mentioned. Like, they just don't come around very often.
Yeah, I mean, the truly great ones don't. And the guys that actually, I mean, what you're looking for is a threat that actually makes the defense think twice about, bringing guys down into the box.
Like
and
peak Deshaun Jackson, right?
Yeah. Really, I think just Deshaun Jackson. I don't think it necessarily needs to be peak. I mean, because again, it's not even necessarily, and this is the other thing too that we don't account for in analytics and stuff when we study this stuff, is the threat and the mentality that it puts in defensive coordinators' minds. Like, that has value, right? That has actual value. It's hard to quantify it because you're only seeing the defensive coordinator's reactions to those players and how does that, actually kind of correspond to actual production. But I think that there is something there, that having that kind of threat makes defensive coordinators think twice about doing or deploying certain fronts or looks because of the threat that, you have this guy who can run faster than everybody else on your defense and get behind them.
I agree. I just don't know how much the Cowboys should prioritize speed on offense, because obviously they need it, but they're going to have other needs this offseason, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're going to need more linebackers. They're going to need probably more offensive line depth. Where does that fit in? We'll see. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about that, though.
I will say real quick, just because we've talked about it, if the Cowboys are going to let Michael Gallup go, if that happens, and I don't even know that necessarily is a foregone conclusion at this point, but if they decide that that's the case, I think the wide receiver becomes a position of need, even with whoever you have left, just because I think this offense needs to be dominant. They need to continue to try to make a dominant offense. I really think it would be a mistake. And this is an off-season discussion. I really think it would be a mistake, despite how good this defense has been, to try to shift to a full complementary offense-defense, because I just don't think that that's replicatable.
Oh, it's not sustainable at all, right?
Yeah.
What's sustainable is having a good offense and then building a defense that's very much turnover prone, right? Like we're kind of seeing this year. There's going to be years where you have a higher variance of turnovers like we're seeing this year, but I agree with you. So we'll see what the Cowboys do this offseason. Their offense is going to be good regardless, because they're bringing back Dak. They're bringing back Amari and CeeDee and Zeke and Pollard and all that kind of stuff. But how much do they lean into making sure they have an elite offense? We'll see. All right. This next question from Todd, and I like this one. What constitutes success this year for the Cowboys? Is it making the championship game? Is it winning in the first round and having a close loss in the second round? Failing to win in round one is a clear failure. but I am having a hard time drawing a line for success.
That's a really good question, because I do think that it's something that Cowboys fans should be asking themselves right now is, what's a step forward? What do you feel like is, obviously Super Bowl or bust is, something that you're setting yourself up for
Failure every
disappointment,
year. Every year.
because it's obviously the goal and that's what the teams should be rooting for. But what should we as fans be happy about as far as postseason success and taking a step forward?
I would say they've already accomplished one big goal, right? Actually, two big goals. They won the NFC East and made the playoffs. And I know those kind of go hand in hand. They do go hand in hand, but that's always the first goal for every single team is win your division. And they did it with 2-3 games left to go in the season. Like they accomplished that pretty easily. So you've already hit one of your goals. I do think you need to at least win a playoff game. At least one.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like that's kind of a sideways step of where we are, I mean, I feel like and maybe I'm, relying too much on recent history as opposed to extremely recent history, but I just feel like we've done one playoff game. I think one playoff game win would be a minimum. If they don't win the playoff game, I will be disappointed in how the season ended.
I agree.
Now, how it goes in that second game is that's the question, right?
I could talk myself into saying this was a successful season if they win in round one and they go to Lambeau and they lose a close game.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, you want more than that, obviously.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
where we were talking about this team at the beginning of the year, I don't think even you – listen, Landon, you're a little bit more of an optimist than I am. I don't think we were thinking of this team as a Super Bowl contending team at the beginning of the year. Now, if everything hit right, maybe. And a lot of things have hit right. But if they don't beat the Packers in Lambeau, I won't be saying, you know what, hey, get rid of everybody. We need to change things. Like, that won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't imagine a clean house scenario at this point.
I was just being a little dramatic there, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think.
Sure, no, totally. I think
small improvements after that.
It's not unlikely that is the initial reaction after losing. Absolutely, but I agree. I think.
Well, you never know how I'm feeling.
Yeah, you never know on the initial reaction, right? I think that like we said, nothing is really going to make me have that kind of reaction long term. I think. I think what would be truly disappointing is if they just continue to fade out, like they lose against Philadelphia because they're trying to get ready for the playoffs, and then they just lose their first round game. That would just be kind of a pathetic ending of 3 straight losses. Just not a good showing of the way they ended the season. I think you would try, you win your first playoff game, and then you see who you're playing in the next round and how you perform against that team. And I think that's, this is the kind of question. It's like, check back with me in a week or 2 weeks, probably. Right. And let's see who we're playing and the situation. And then I can set the kind of standard of what I think is a win or what is a step forward for this team versus what is just more of the same.
I do agree with you. Winning a playoff game, I think, is a small step forward, but not a big one. Right. You're at least not going in the wrong direction. Right. Yeah. I think losing in the first round, and let's say it's in really ugly fashion, that's a really bad look for this team if that happens, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because they don't have a ton of excuses for it. It's just, if there's a bunch of injuries or something, that would be one thing. But if they go into this game, that playoff game relatively healthy, and then they can't win their first playoff game
at home,
that's disappointing.
It's very disappointing. I would agree. Yeah. All right, let's take one more quick break so I can tell you guys about Get Upside. Our listeners are making up to 25 cents for every single gallon of gas every single time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use promo code Touchdown and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or e-gift card. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code Touchdown to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. That is promo code Touchdown. All right, this question from David. He wants to know, some guy named John Owning had some really interesting data about how Dak seems to immediately check down when the defense shows a closed or open middle of the field pre-snap look and then reverses that look post-snap. Any idea why he can't process that, and or why Moore isn't doing anything to combat that?
I think it's incredibly difficult is why. I
Yeah.
mean, it's something that's been giving
Good
all the
question,
elite
though.
quarterbacks. It's a very good question. Like, and I think it's a question that a lot of offensive coordinators are asking themselves: how do we combat this, right? Because it's been the popular way of look. The Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio style of defense is not the thing that's revolutionary about it, or that's really changing is not that they're playing cover two or that they're playing, middle of the field open coverages. It's that they're showing you a look pre-snap and then moving to another look post-snap, right? And that is what has been the kind of fashionable and frankly very successful type of defense against some of these better quarterbacks. And it's not just Dak, it's all of them almost. You've seen Mahomes struggle with it. We've seen lots of different quarterbacks that are in that tier struggle with it. So part of it is that there's not a ton an offensive coordinator can do at that point. And that's really why the defensive coordinator, they do that, is that the offensive coordinator can give you all the answers you need for whatever specific type of coverage they have, right?
Mhm.
If the quarterback changes the play pre-snap in order to adjust to what he's seeing, and then obviously they change that post-snap, the check down is a safe play because you're not throwing into a trap necessarily, except for the fact that the check down is the trap, right? The check down is
Right.
what they're
Right.
trying to get you to do. So I definitely agree. I mean, looking at the numbers and looking at the film, you see it. Like those things match up. That Dak is hesitant in those situations to get the ball down the field. And we can argue about what kind of coverage it is. And I saw that back and forth between Bob Sturm and Babe. It ultimately doesn't matter because whether it was two, whether it was man, whether it was two under, whatever, whether it was cover seven, there still are shots to be taken. And even in the ones that was being described, like there was a turkey hole shot that could have been made, for Cooper. We have to find a way to attack these situations and not just play it safe because things look a little bit messy post snap. And I know that's, Dak's just going to need to continue to look at film and look at that. But I think that it is a thing that a lot of offensive coordinators are asking themselves right now. And I think that the solution to it is two things. One, you got to play some more tempo. And two, you've got to find a way to make these defenses pay when you see open receivers in these situations so that they don't want to have their safeties trying to fly back.
Yep.
You got to make them pay for having Budda Baker line up at the line, in the box, and then have to run 25 yards back.
Yeah, exactly. You got to hit big plays on them, right?
You got to hit the big plays and make them stop doing that if you want them to stop doing that.
This isn't anything new, by the way. Like teams try to do this to Peyton Manning for years, right? And sometimes they would get him, and sometimes he would struggle, especially in big playoff games. Like I can think of a handful of times when the Patriots or the Steelers would do this to Peyton, and he would struggle. But eventually, he would speed up the tempo. He would keep one personnel group on the field, and basically say, "Hey, if you're going to play this, I'm going to snap the ball at 25 seconds every single time, and you're not going to have a chance to do that."
I'll say this too. There's another group that we need to include here, and that's the wide receivers, because ultimately a lot of these routes are based on what the coverage is. So if the wide receiver isn't reading the coverage the same way as the quarterback, the wide receiver is going to run a different route than the quarterback is expecting. And I think that's what happens when you see stuff like that Cooper stop route, where I think Dak thought he was supposed to run to daylight, right? It's that, versus man, you do this, versus zone, you do this. And sometimes it's difficult to parse whether you're in man or zone based on, some of these match coverages, man match and zone match coverages. So it's a lot of complicated math. It's not as straightforward as we all make it out to be. And we're only just folks on the internet who are watching this stuff and studying playbooks. It's ultimately way more complicated than even that. So I think the way to solve this is try to strip everything down, try to get the quick game going, get up to the line of scrimmage quickly so that they don't even really have the opportunity to do a lot of this stuff to confuse Dak, and just to make things simple for the reads for the wide receivers and the quarterback.
All right. Next question. This one is from, sorry, I lost the name. This one's from John. Is this offense not built around Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb? They've had multiple games where they hardly have 50 yards, but the Packers and Rams all get the ball to their stud wide receivers. Why can't the Cowboys do the same?
I
It's
mean,
a complicated question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the thing about it is that I don't know that Cooper or Lamb right now are playing like Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp. I would say, especially. I mean, Cooper Kupp's having a phenomenal season. So I don't know. I think right now there's efficiency problems. They're having a hard time hooking up and just getting basic plays. I think if a lot of this would be solved if they could just convert some of these, just simply catch the ball and then, let these players randomly break tackles and get some yak. But because, you had a game where like I would say half of Cooper's, targets either had a pass deflection, a miscommunication between the quarterback, it just seems completely disjointed. And when you don't get any kind of, and this is exactly what we talked about yesterday, when you don't get any kind of reliable consistency from your pass catchers, it's tough to continue this offense, to continue to get shots to take chances with Lamb and Cooper.
I will also say this. Do you know that the Cowboys have more yards and more points per game than both the Rams and Packers do? Like,
yeah.
Here's the thing. When you rely so heavily on one receiver, like the Rams and the Packers both do, and Kupp and Adams are both having fantastic years. Like Kupp might break the single season receiving yard record. Yep. Yes, your offense is consistent throwing the ball to those guys because you make it a priority. What ends up happening is the other players in your offense end up being wildly inconsistent. And we see this with Green Bay all the time. Like there's games where Al Nazard will have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. There'll be games where he doesn't have a single catch. If you've played basketball before, you know what I'm talking about. Like if there's one guy who's taking all the shots and then all of a sudden you get the ball and you have to put up a shot, you're not going to be in rhythm at all. Right. Yeah. And it actually ends up hurting your offense despite one player just putting up a bunch of points. It's kind of the same thing. While Kupp and Adams are having really good seasons, their offenses haven't been as good as Dallas has been all year because they're just in a better rhythm. They don't need one player to carry their offense. And I get it. We're living in the fantasy football era of the NFL. Yeah. It's really fun to see our guys go over 100 yards every week, but it's kind of not what makes an offense hard to stop, right?
And the thing is, you can't have both, right? Like, right. I mean, we spent all this time, during the Jason Garrett era complaining about, star-based offenses, and especially with Scott Linehan, right? Like, I mean, offenses that you are trying to force feed the ball to your stars over.
Yeah, Dez was getting 40% of the passing targets during that time, right?
And so, and it wasn't working. And so now you get a pick your poison type offense that, is really adjusting to what the defense is doing to them, even more so than, the Garrett offense kind of claimed to do. And it's not going to be a consistent, and that's and this is the pull, right? Like when you have that kind of Garrett offense, you're always going to be begging for more variety. You're always going to be begging for more a change up or something different, to go to the ball different ways, to target different guys. When you're in this kind of offense, it seems like all season we've been kind of asking for what's the consistent thing? What's the thing that you hang your hat on when nothing else is working? And I think that both of these types of offenses have those flaws, right? So we're constantly going to be looking for a reliable thing that you can hang your hat on in this offense, because we spend most of the time distributing the ball and having 10 different receivers. So, I think you brought it up. The Cowboys offense is as successful as any offense in the NFL.
It's the number one offense in the NFL. Even after a month of struggling a little bit. I mean, we're talking about struggling, scoring 22 points in the game.
Dak threw 3 touchdowns last week. It's like
the Rams scored 20 points against Baltimore last week, and they thought it was one of the best games they've had all season. Like, I don't know, man. It's not a big deal. Cooper Kupp has 184 targets this year. Do you know who leads the Cowboys in targets?
Lamb, maybe?
It's Lamb with 118. He's got like 70 fewer targets than Cooper Kupp has, which that's basically the difference in another entire receiver like Michael Gallup had 62 targets this year.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I get being frustrated because somebody doesn't have 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns, and we're not talking about them as a Pro Bowl receiver, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's about winning games, and the Cowboys have won a bunch of games. So
Yeah,
if we get into the playoffs and we still can't generate an offense,
it's a different discussion. But
Got a
I
different
honestly
discussion.
think we're not talking about the Cowboys' struggles because they're not getting the ball to CD and Amari enough. I don't think that's at all. It's been execution, right? It's missing guys and not running the right routes or not running them at the right depth. I don't think it's been, hey, the Cowboys aren't getting Amari and CD involved. I don't think that's been
absolutely. Yeah. It's not because they don't want to. It's because it just hasn't.
It hasn't happened.
Disjointed. It hasn't connected. Yeah.
Last question from @DC Draft: are the Cowboys the reason I don't have feelings anymore? Yes.
Yep.
Pretty simple, right? We've lost games in the most frustrating way possible. You win games, all we do is think about the next week. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, right?
Just a numbing agent, basically, being a Cowboys fan.
I'm gonna need years and years of therapy to get over the last couple seasons. All right,
I'm dead inside.
What's that?
I'm dead inside.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Follow the show at Locked On Cowboys. Download the podcast wherever you're getting your podcasts. Tomorrow, we've got a podcast coming out with Locked On Eagles. Actually recording that tonight. Really looking forward to that. So make sure you guys are tuning in. We'll be back on Friday to preview the Cowboys Saturday night matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. We will see you next time.